My name is Daniel Humm. We're at 11 Madison Park in New York City. 11 Madison Park is celebrating 25 years this year. 19 of those years I've been part of it, but the restaurant was opened in 1998 by Danny Meyer. And I think the original inspiration was for this to be a brasserie. When I arrived here in 2005, they were serving steak frites and seafood towers. So it was like a French brasserie. That was the initial idea. When I came on board, we kind of felt that this restaurant could be one of the great dining rooms in the world. And then sort of slowly over the years, kind of like evolved it to what it is today. But at the beginning, when I took over from Europe, grew up in Switzerland, was very kind of classic European style, Michelin cooking. And that got us pretty far. Eventually we got 3 stars in Michelin and 4 stars in the New York Times. But at that point we felt like, we should push a little bit further. This is such an iconic space. We're so fortunate, like that the space really speaks New York. And so we wanted to reflect that on the plate a little bit more. So we said, hey, we really want this restaurant to have a sense of place. So we started studying New York cuisine and the traditions that were brought here, and then the way they have evolved from the appetizing stores to the delis to the egg creams to the black and white cookies. And it's quite bountiful. And that was an amazing thing. I wrote a book called I Love New York, and that was sort of our next chapter. Along that process, I think we got sort of like recognized within the world of fine dining on a global stage. And in that evolution, at some point, I think it became more about sort of minimalism, taking away and reducing it to the absolute sort of minimum. In 2010, when we knew we wanted to be an iconic New York City restaurant, we studied all the iconic restaurants over the history in New York, like from the 21 Club to Delmonico's to the Four Seasons restaurant. And we noticed that all these restaurants had a steak tartare on their menu. So we felt like, well, if we wanted to be an iconic New York City restaurant, we should have our own version on a steak tartare. And for like a year, we were practicing on our version on a steak tartare, but nothing really felt quite unique or contemporary. We always knew we wanted to, grind the steak at the table, but we tried it with like venison, with beef and dry aged beef and all kinds of things. And only like a year into it, just as we were about to abandon the idea, it was a day I was upstate at one of the farms, Alex Paffenroth, who is like grows so many carrots in the muck soil, and it's such a great climate to grow carrots. And I was there for the whole day, and he's walking me through the meaty tasting carrots to the more acidic carrots to the more sweet tasting carrots. I mean, he was speaking about carrots an entire day. And that night I came back to the restaurant and we had sort of a brainstorm session, a creative session, and we were again like looking at our version on the steak tartare. And in that moment it became clear that it isn't steak, it's in fact carrot. And in 2010 that became an important dish. So kind of like our vegetable journey has sort of, not happened overnight, but in stages. There was another dish, it was the celery root cooked en vessie, like a famous dish in the pig's bladder that is used mostly for cooking chicken, and it's really sort of like the original way of cooking sous vide in an airtight container. And even then, we used celery root. So we were constantly kind of like challenging, pushing the boundaries and sort of putting question if we really needed meat. There was a dish we did with sort of like it was meant to be a caviar dish, but it was with sugar snap peas, and we only used the inside of the sugar snap peas because they're like, sweet and delicious and crunchy and have this texture similar to caviar. And then we added caviar on top. And as we did that, we were saying, we don't need the caviar. This dish is better without it. And so then we did the caviar dish without caviar. During the pandemic was really groundbreaking for us, where we turned this kitchen into a community kitchen, and we just cooked meals for people in need. But if I take you back a little bit more, I was a professional cyclist and left school when I was 14 years old to pursue that career. I had an accident when I was 22 that ended my hopes in cycling and my career. And I was laying in the hospital and I was thinking, wow, what other options do I have? And I didn't have that many because I didn't have a lot of schooling to show for. But I did have this love for cooking. I grew up outside of Zurich in Switzerland in a small town. My parents were hippies. I grew up mostly vegetarian. We ate meat like once a week, but it was always kind of like known where the meat was coming from. And I went to school with like my Tupperware containers and with like a homemade baked cake or bread, and I always felt embarrassed because everyone else had like store-bought like things. I didn't realize at that point how much of an advantage I had. But then, of course, also being an athlete, what I put in my body was always really important. So food was actually the one other thing outside of cycling that I had this real passion for. And so I was in the hospital and I said, well, if I can't be the best cyclist, I'm going to become the best chef. I went to work for the best chef after that. I worked there for 2.5 years, then had my own little restaurant, or I was the chef had my own little kitchen in a restaurant. I got a Michelin star when I was 24, very young, way too young for where I was at. But I had this athlete's mentality. I wanted to win. I wanted to climb this mountain. I wanted to, be rewarded by accolades, because this is what I knew. As an athlete, you only, enter a race for the reason of winning. So I was like, well, if I enter the kitchen, it's for the reason of winning. And so we started climbing this mountain. I moved then to the US and continue on this journey. I wanted to win everything. I wanted to win the smallest rating. I wanted to win the smallest, prize. Every prize mattered. And it was very powerful, and it worked, and it was measurable, and the team got behind it, and it's created this extreme momentum. And there was competition among the restaurant that was also healthy, and it made everyone better. In 2017, our restaurant was named the best restaurant in the world. At that time, there was not a single award that we didn't reach. We had, all the James Beard awards you can think of. We had 3 Michelin stars for over a decade. We had the New York Times stars. We had the SAGAT ratings. We had everything. And intellectually, I understood that none of these awards on its own are that meaningful, but they were a powerful tool to be motivated by. I think we all had a plan to reach that mountaintop, but we didn't really have a plan what to do with it when we reached it. And so it was quite disorienting. The next morning, you wake up, you're like, I don't know what award we're reaching for the past 20 years. That was very clear. And so it ended up becoming a very challenging time, not a very happy time, although the opportunities were pouring in. Everything a chef can dream of, opening restaurants around the globe, putting their name on products, giving interviews. but it was not a happy time for me. And I knew that there had to be something bigger than winning awards. And for the next few years, I kind of tried to figure this out. I co-founded an organization called Rethink Food. We take food from restaurants, prepare meals for people in need. So I kind of knew that there was more meaning to it. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. The pandemic shocked our industry. We were on our knees. We lost our staff. And the thing about restaurants, in real estate, people say location, location, location. In restaurants, it's people, people, people. No matter how beautiful this restaurant is, if there is not this amazing group of people who are here every day, this is worth nothing. So that was devastating. And then financially, it was tough also. We were facing bankruptcy. We didn't know how to pay our bills. But because I was involved with Rethink, I was very much in touch with food insecurity, the status on food insecurity in New York. Just to put it in perspective, before the pandemic, there were 1 million people food insecure in New York City. This is out of 8 million people. And food insecurity doesn't mean like homeless. It's people with 3 jobs and having a hard time to bring food on the table. That number jumped to 2 million within 2 weeks of the pandemic. So now we're in New York City. There's 25% of New York City is food insecure. So I was just at home, like thinking about how we can help. I started visiting soup kitchens around New York. I wanted to understand how they work and how can we get involved. And it was challenging because all the soup kitchens were shutting down because a lot of volunteers working in them, elderly people. People are afraid of COVID. We're all afraid. No one knew exactly how you can get it and will you survive it. I mean, it's a scary time in New York. They're building hospitals in Central Park. There's the ship coming in, the military, you remember that? It was crazy. But somehow I felt the need of doing something. I had cooks that had no jobs. I had a restaurant that was empty. I was speaking to the farmers who were sitting on food that was going bad. So we just decided pretty quickly to sort of turn the lights back on and start cooking meals for people in need. And that started to be really satisfying. We cooked 8,000 meals every day for almost 2 years. Every single day, we put 8,000 meals a day in these small cardboard boxes. And not only did we cook the meals, but we also then wanted to know, okay, where are these meals going? How do these communities work? So we did a lot of outreach. I met amazing people along the way, angels who have so little and give everything. There's a lot of guilt that I felt. I've only cooked for the 1% my entire life. And in the end, it felt empty. So all of a sudden, I was waking up in the morning in the midst of the pandemic, facing bankruptcy, but waking up happy and felt like that the work we're doing really made a difference. And it changed my life. And so at times, I didn't even know if I wanted to reopen 11 Madison Park. I felt like maybe that chapter is closed. We did everything with that restaurant that was possible to do. We reached the absolute summit. A few months into the pandemic, the landlord called and said, you know, we see the work you're doing in the community. We want to be supportive. And also, this city needs you to reopen this restaurant, and this building needs you to reopen the restaurant. And at that point, we're still more than a year out of reopening. But when I put my creative hat back on, I knew that I had changed. I knew that I had no interest in opening the same restaurant as before. I felt I had a responsibility to use this platform and my voice of food for change. One doesn't need to be an expert in climate or the food system to know that our food system is collapsing. The chickens have bird flu. The fish eat plastic, having diseases they never had before, making us sick, actually. The beef being pumped with antibiotics. The Amazon is burning to create more land. So what's complicated is that what we eat feels like it's part of our identity. And so people have a hard time to let go of that. And also food is beautiful in that way, because when you eat something that you ate growing up, it puts you back to this place, it gives you comfort. It's about traditions too. I think we need to really think about traditions, and some of these traditions need to go and need to change and need to evolve. Like, for example, turkey, Thanksgiving. Does anyone really know why we eat turkey that day? Does it really matter that much? A lot of people don't even like it. It's dry most of the time. 45 million turkeys are slaughtered for that single day. And that should give us pause. That should make us think. It's like, hold on, where are these turkeys from? Because I've never seen those kind of fields of turkey running around freely. So there must be a problem. And so I think us asking these questions, I think it's really important. We can't just be stuck in these traditions. We do need to evolve, and it's time to evolve. And I think it's for the chefs to push these boundaries forward, because the big food industry has realized it. Today, when you go to a dairy aisle, you're lost. You don't know what milk to buy. This milk, that milk, the nut milk. It's confusing. Are these good for us? Are these good for the environment? No one knows. The science has, hugely evolved and has found solutions to have alternatives. I think there's a lot of money that's being poured into it. There's a lot of money that's being made with these meat substitutions. But I think chefs need to get behind it, because food should be led by taste and not by science. And so I think it's time for chefs really to embrace this new world, because this isn't going anywhere. This isn't a trend. This isn't all of a sudden better again. I'm not an expert in climate. I'm not an expert in the food system. But I am an expert in the ingredients that arrive at the back of our restaurant on a daily basis. And I have seen a dramatic change, and so has every chef. There are ingredients that used to be available, they're no longer available. There used to be ingredients that used to taste a certain way, they're no longer tasting this way. So we need to wake up. We need to come up with other solutions. And we're not saying we're anti-meat, but we are pro-planet. For me, during the pandemic, I thought so much about luxury and luxury in food, because this is what 11 Madison Park is. It's a luxurious experience. And I thought a lot about the so-called luxury ingredients, and sort of realized that some of those stories are old stories, and in fact, there are no more luxury ingredients. They might be expensive, but they're not rare and they're not unique. They don't taste that good. So for me, it was like, okay, what is truly luxury? And for me, it's something to receive an experience that is truly unique, that is handcrafted, that I can only get in this one place. Cooking with vegetables is, of course, so much more labor intensive. We started a farm upstate, the Magic Farm, with a close friend of mine who has the farm, runs the farm. He used to be a fashion photographer. His name is Jack. He opened Magic Farms for our restaurant. We now think a year prior to what's going to be on your plate. To me, those kind of things are much more luxurious than just going to the store and buying something expensive and, sear it on both sides and put it on a plate. But I think truly thoughtful, created meals. It's a lot of labor to, make a celery root live up to a dish that, has to rival the things people have been accustomed to. I think cooking with vegetables, you have to be, hyper aware of your seasons, because you really want to pick the things when they're the best, or, during the fall and winter months, you want to kind of prepare ahead of time, and maybe there's, more pickling and more fermenting, and so you really have to plan a lot more in advance. But we also, on our farm, we have 4 greenhouses, so we're able to grow certain things even in the colder months. No, it's beautiful because when you eat a plant-based dish, every element of that dish is of the season. That was never the case before. It was just a seasonal condiment. Reaching the number 1 restaurant in the world spot and having 3 Michelin stars for years, that's an incredible thing, and I'm very proud of it and I'm grateful for it. But today when I look back, there's definitely a lot of, you do these things a lot for selfish reasons. You want to reach that mountaintop, and as I said, I was a professional athlete, so winning was everything. But today we are climbing a whole new mountain, and along this path, I think awards are continuously being important because we need to get people behind this kind of movement, but they're not everything. And so today, I think this mountain is so big. I mean, we need a whole world to change towards a plant-forward diet. People arrive to being plant-based in a lot of different ways. Like some people are about animal cruelty. Some people think the way animals are farmed isn't right. Some people come to it from a climate perspective, which is how I came to it. But the one thing that cannot be ignored by nobody is that we're running out of resources. I just read a study that by 2050, if we continue the way we eat meat, we will need 3 planets to feed 1 planet. Well, we don't have 3 planets, so we really have to change, and that's what I'm excited about, to hopefully be part of, really motivating others to go down this road or up this mountain. And in fact, it's beautiful. Cooking with vegetable is amazing, and it makes you healthier, it makes you happier. There's also all these studies on longevity, and clearly, eating meat isn't supporting that. In fact, what we put on our plates as an individual is the most powerful thing we can do to fight the changing climate. So for me, and this platform, if we're celebrated as this great restaurant and celebrated for choosing the best ingredients are no longer the ingredients we were accustomed to. I thought a lot about luxury too. Caviar, for example. There is nothing luxurious about caviar today. It's a completely old idea. Caviar is farm raised in tanks in the middle of the desert somewhere. The tanks are so filled with fish. No one wants to go see that. But somehow we are trying to hold on to this story of caviar as a luxury ingredient which is 100% false today. And so I felt like, well, we need to use our voice to speak up, and we need to make a change. And we have an opportunity because I felt that we were selling an experience. And so we're telling stories here at 11 Madison Park. So it's a unique kind of, it's more like going to see a Broadway show, coming here. So then I was like, well, maybe it could work because people are coming for the experience, not just for the food on a plate. It's much more challenging for another restaurant where in people's mind, you know, a piece of meat still has so much more value than a vegetable. And we all have to pay our rents and our staff, and this is a tough business. But we were in a unique position where I felt we could take this risk. And, you know, we decided to reopen the restaurant as fully plant-based. It's been an incredible journey. We are now looking at cuisines we've never looked before. You know, we worked with Zen Buddhist monks from Japan to learn about Shojin cooking, one of the oldest cuisines. We, you know, work with chefs from Israel, chefs from Lebanon. We travel to India because 40% of India is eating vegetarian. So in a way, it's just been so incredibly inspiring. We had fears. We didn't know this can work. I mean, the nights before we reopened reservations, these were sleepless. Will anyone come to a plant-based, you know, fine dining restaurant? We didn't know. We also felt like, wow, maybe we would be limited by not using all these things that we used to before. Our restaurant was famous for duck. It was famous for lobster. It was famous for caviar. It was famous for all these things. Reopening this restaurant in the midst of the pandemic without relying on any of those things that actually made us successful was really scary. You know, there were challenges for sure, and it's a learning experience, and we didn't get it all right from the beginning. I mean, how can you? And I think that's part of change. And I think that's what I want to speak to, is that we do need to change. We're not asking for perfection. We're not asking for every restaurant to be vegetarian or vegan, but we're asking to push yourself to give more options. Like, actually change happens slowly, you know, one dinner at a time, one plate at a time, in your own personal diet, one day at a time. You know, you can have a meatless day per week and then another, and eventually you realize that eating meat is weird and not healthy. And all of a sudden your body actually speaks to you and saying, wow, oh my God, I feel so much better. This is actually the way forward. We thought we may be limited, but today our cooking is so much more creative, so much more beautiful, so much more poetic, so much more magical. Before, we only cooked seasonal condiments. We cooked seasonal condiments for fish and meat. But today we're cooking the entire season. Today we're completely free. What is a main course in a plant-based restaurant? Could be 500 different things. What is a main course in a traditional restaurant? The options are 5. So this world over here is so much more beautiful, so much more magical. And I really encourage, you know, everyone to keep an open mind. Of course, it comes with fear, but if we do it together as an industry and we show the magic of vegetables, you know, we live in a scary time in the world, but vegetables aren't scary. And I hope everyone can really embrace them.